What's up, guys? Not a good day yesterday, 2-4, although pretty much none of the plays were out of reach, really, except for the UTSA one, although even they made a huge comeback near the end. They were down by too much to be able to get back into it. The final score looks better than that game was, but even that one wasn't completely out of reach, although that was the one that was like the big loser. The day started out okay with Minnesota with the cover, although they tried to blow it. That game was pretty close. It was back and forth. They were down at some points late in the game. They were up at some points late in the game, but it got to a point where they were up 3 with 17 seconds left or something, and for no apparent reason, Minnesota decided to intentionally foul Boo Buie before he even got it past half court. I don't know what they were thinking, because you might want to intentionally foul with like maybe a couple of seconds left just so they can't get a 3-point attempt when you're up 3. But when it's 17 seconds left, obviously you have to play defense at that point. Or you could foul, maybe you could justify fouling somebody who's a horrible free throw shooter, but Boo Boo is like an 85% free throw shooter. That move made absolutely no sense. I don't know what that player on Minnesota was thinking. I don't know what was going on there. He actually missed one of the two. So then it's like, all right, Minnesota's got the ball back now, still up 2. They're going to get to the free throw line again. They're going to put this away. No, they turned it over on the inbound pass on this bad play where they just succumbed to Northwestern's pressure, and the ball went out of bounds off of Minnesota. But Ben Johnson, Minnesota's coach, was also trying to call a timeout, and the refs never saw him, and he was there over like kind of on the sideline over there near half court, I think, and the timeout was never called, never given, even though he was trying to get the refs' attention. Just crazy. So that gave Northwestern the ball back again. They tied it and went into overtime. And then luckily Minnesota was able to put together a nice overtime period and put it away and actually win by 11, which is really ridiculous, which they definitely did play pretty well in overtime. But even so, that was too close. Texas A&M, they were in a situation where they were up 1 with not that much time left and had the ball back, so they were going to have to get intentionally fouled, and they were quite likely going to wind up getting above the 2.5 number there. But what did they do? No, the guy who was inbounding it traveled on the baseline before even inbounding the ball, and the ref literally said to him, "You can't move," like telling him, even though everybody should know that rule, that when you're inbounding, you have to stay where you are, get the inbound, and you can't move. But or at least, I don't know what the rule is, actually. I think you can't move both feet, maybe is what it is. But the ref literally told him that, and then he still did, and it was a travel. So that turned the ball over, and then I didn't even see the end of that game because I was too frustrated when that happened. I was like, I'm not even going to watch what happens here. I don't even know what happened, but the final score remained what that score was, with A&M winning by 1. So I don't know what happened there. Neither team scored again after that. Doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, I guess it was probably a situation where I don't even remember who was Texas A&M even up against. Who did I bet against? I don't even remember. Whoever they were playing against must have just let me see here. God, excuse me. Trying to figure out what actually happened in that game there. Yeah, Florida is who it was. It must have been a situation where Florida must have just held on to it for the final shot, basically, because it was a 1-point game. So you can do that and just take the final shot as time expires, and they must have not scored, something like that. I don't know. So that was what happened there. NC State, was covering at some points towards the end of that game. That was like back and forth, like going from 8 to 6, over and over again. It looked like near the end, and NC State needed to win by 8 to cover. And I think they were up 8 again on like the final possession that happened or whatever. I think I haven't looked, but and then Georgia Tech, I think, scored on the final possession they had meaninglessly to get it back to 6 to cover the spread. Painful as well. And then Brooklyn Nets are a nice, easy win. The only easy win. Every one of these games was way too close for the most part, pretty much, except that one in UTSA, I guess, the big loss. And then the other NBA game, the New York Knicks, man, I mean, they were doing it. they were winning, not by much. They weren't able to put together like a big lead, but they had the lead for most of that game. It just wasn't a substantial lead. And it's like, all right, you got to play a good fourth quarter now, put it away. Looked like they might be able to do that, but instead, no, they had a complete fourth quarter implosion. And I think they scored like 12 points in the entire quarter or something like that. And I believe they went into the quarter with the lead by like 2 or 3 points. And that was the game I told you to wait on because I thought LeBron or AD or both of them might come back, and they did both come back, which made it kind of a double reverse injured player theory, and it actually dropped the line all the way down to 2. I wound up getting in on it at 2.5 on the Knicks, and it still didn't get there. So just great. Excellent. Moving on to today, I actually have 4 plays. We're going to college basketball first. Let's do that first. Why not? I do not have a play on the big game of the day, which is at 1 p.m., which is going to be pretty interesting. Number 2, Purdue at number 6, Wisconsin. This one's going to be real interesting. Purdue's down from 3.5 to 2.5, but they have 52% of the cash on them, 54% of the tickets over on the other side on Wisconsin. I think this is going to be an interesting game. I don't even know which way I would lean in this game because situationally, both teams are coming off not a very good performance, really. Purdue was taken into overtime at home against Northwestern, and maybe they were looking ahead to this game a little bit, knowing that this is going to be a pretty big battle. Like, whoever wins this game is going to be, I believe, in the lead in the Big Ten, because Purdue's a half game ahead of Wisconsin right now. Although I think Purdue is still the better team, and the line is telling you that they're favored on the road, but not by much. It's a pretty close matchup here. And the line, I think, is kind of right where the power ratings have it as well, somewhere in like the 2 vicinity. So there's nothing really to gain from that either, I don't think. But both teams are coming off performances that were not that good. Purdue got taken into overtime by Northwestern as a huge favorite and still won and escaped. Whereas Wisconsin, we know what happened. Wisconsin, I was complaining about it. They had the game where they went into Nebraska and they were just blowing Nebraska out for much of the game, and then seemed like reffing got involved and really turned that game around. There was a major free throw attempt discrepancy in that game on the side of Nebraska, favoring Nebraska. So that was just kind of ridiculous the way that played out after Wisconsin was blowing them out and was still winning for the entire game until like the final 30 seconds of regulation or something. And that game, I believe, also went into overtime and Wisconsin lost. So nothing to really take away from that, really, because I think both teams are probably not happy with the way that they performed in their previous game. Both teams are obviously going to show up for this. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be fun. So that'll be a fun one, I think. Moving to the actual plays that I have today, the first play I'm going to be on is going to be on SMU minus 7.5. This is both plays are going to be on games that I believe are in the evening. Let me see here. They're both like kind of one after the other. They're both going to be playing simultaneously in the evening, but SMU minus 7.5 is going to be the first play. The number looks like it's actually gone down from 9.5 to 7.5, but I do see 67% of the tickets and only 51% of the cash on UAB. So right now it does look like the cash discrepancy is coming in on the side of SMU, whereas it looks like the more public tickets might be on UAB right now. So I do like to see that. I think people are going to look at this and think this line looks crazy because both of these teams have the same record, same overall record, and UAB has a better in-conference record. So how is SMU laying 7.5 points? What is going on here? SMU's coming off a win over UAB. Nobody's really going to care about that. UAB. They're playing UAB today. They're coming off a win over Tulane, who has not been that good. So nobody's really going to put much stock into that. Whereas UAB is coming off beating North Texas on the road, and that was after they beat Memphis. And they have FAU up next. So I'm considering this to be a sandwich spot for UAB, man. And it's a second straight road game. But they beat Memphis, which was a huge win, of course, for UAB. That was, I believe, last Sunday. I think I was watching it on the plane ride back. I had that game on a little bit. UAB played a nice game, beat Memphis. That, I believe, knocked Memphis out of the rankings. Memphis was ranked 19 at the time. Big win for UAB on their own floor, even though Memphis is overrated. They had to go on the road, a tough game to face North Texas, man. North Texas is a very frustrating team that likes to slow teams down, but they did not slow UAB down, and that game wound up being played at a way faster pace than I think is comfortable for North Texas, and UAB wound up winning that game at North Texas. And North Texas is a pretty decent team as well, not a bad team. Tough to play on the road. Now they're coming off that. They're having to go on a second straight road game to SMU, and SMU is behind them in the conference standings, as I just mentioned, by one game. So I think this game might mean a little bit more to SMU here to try to get back to get back tied with UAB in the conference there. Whereas UAB does have FAU up next. Like I said, Florida Atlantic in 4 days. I don't know if that's going to be a little bit of a look ahead because Florida Atlantic is, of course, leading the conference and is the best team in the conference and is back in the rankings. And this is a first-time matchup for UAB and SMU because they don't play again until the final regular season game of the season on March 10th. But all the things I just said, I think UAB is in a tough spot here, man. Even though SMU has a decent record, they are still behind UAB, and I think this is going to be a little bit sandwichy because they didn't suffer the letdown after the Memphis game. Now, after beating North Texas, I think this might be where they might just have a bad spot here in a second straight road game with FAU up next. I don't like the spot for UAB here. And I think the records are really misleading and not really indicative of the discrepancy between these two teams. I think SMU, as the line is telling you, is significantly the better team. People are also going to look at that recent matchup because both teams just played at North Texas recently and say, wait a minute, SMU lost at North Texas, and that game was definitely played more to the pace of North Texas. It was a close game, but it was a slower pace game. North Texas was able to seize control of the pace of that game and slow it down. People are going to say SMU lost at North Texas, whereas UAB went in and beat North Texas. So what's going on here? How am I getting 7.5 points with a team that has like the same record and the better record in conference and just beat North Texas on the road, whereas North Texas beat SMU in that same situation at North Texas? So how are we getting 7.5 points here? It just looks really, really suspicious. I think to the recreational bettor's eye, they're going to think this game looks like it's close, looks like it's way too many points to be taken with UAB, and I don't think that that's the case, dude. I think Ken Baum, actually has, I think this number higher than 7.5. I think even maybe closer to where the line actually came out, where it opened. He has SMU as the way, way better team here. He has SMU ranked 47 and UAB all the way down at 136. And he also has UAB as the 6th luckiest team in the country in his luck index, which has to do with like how many like close games that you've won, like how many of your wins are close games and all that stuff. He has UAB as the 6th luckiest team in the country, and he has SMU as the 352nd ranked team in luck, which is that's out of 362 teams. So he has them as the 10th or 11th least lucky team. So you have the 6th luckiest team in the country, according to Ken Baum, in UAB, going up against the 10th or 11th least lucky team in all of college basketball, in SMU, meaning SMU's lost a lot of close games. So that doesn't look good either for UAB. So I think the line, which looks suspicious, I think might actually be a little bit short here, and it's not the best spot for UAB either. So I like all of this, man. I like SMU in this one quite a bit, and like I just said, the luck indices on Ken Palm's website there are telling you some things about these teams too, telling you that UAB, their record probably looks better than it should be, and SMU's maybe is a little bit worse than it should be. SMU, he actually has them in like range where they might even be considered to be like a tournament team ranked at 47. I mean, they're really flying under the radar right now. They're a much better team than I think people think that they are. And yeah, I mean, I think that's going to do it for that handicap there. Tempo-wise, both of these teams kind of play a similar tempo, kind of like in the mid-tempo range. So I like SMU minus 7.5 in that one. The other game I'm on, this is kind of a classic letdown spot, even though it does mean that I'm laying points with a good team in this case, and I'm laying it with Illinois. We got to get back on track, man. I've had a bad last like couple weeks or so. I've been down the last couple weeks. Now I'm down. It's almost to the point where I've almost broken even since the start of the year. Now I'm only slightly ahead on the year, whereas I was fairly significantly ahead a couple of weeks ago. So this hasn't been good. We got to get back on track, man. We're on a bad run right now, though it does happen. But you wind up on the positive side of things if you just continue doing what you're doing in the end, it evens out, but it's a large sample size. So what's the game I'm on here, though? Oh, yeah, it's on Illinois, minus 9.5, laying the 9.5 with Illinois. This looks like it's going up, so I would try to get in on this. They're up from 9.5 to 10. They have 82% of the cash, but 68% of the tickets. So Illinois, they're going to be a little bit of the public team, of course, because they're the ranked team, but they are laying a lot of points. And it looks like they have the cash discrepancy, more of the cash than the tickets right now, because people are going to think that Nebraska, pretty competitive team, man, and like what Nebraska's done. Nebraska beat Purdue and Wisconsin. They're 1-1 against Wisconsin and 1-0 against Purdue. So Nebraska's done really well against the top two teams in the Big Ten, really. So people are going to look at that and think maybe think that Nebraska is going to be a little bit competitive here and like Nebraska here. But Nebraska is coming off that giant win against Wisconsin. And I told you about that game, man, repeatedly, where the refs really helped out Nebraska in that game. They were down by almost 20 in that game, getting blown out on their own floor. The refs and kind of an implosion by Wisconsin all helped Nebraska get back in the game. I think Nebraska was very lucky to have won that game, winning a game that you don't have a lead in until the final 30 seconds and you're losing almost the entire game. Probably have no business winning that game. And now they're coming off that. I believe that was a court storming for Nebraska in that game, a huge win over the number 6 ranked team in the country and one of the top teams in your conference on your home floor, court storming. Now off of that, you got to be in a little bit of a letdown spot, man. You got to go out and face Illinois, and Illinois is just kind of sitting there coming off of a couple of wins over teams that aren't really that good in the conference, beating Indiana and then going out and beating Ohio State. Both of those teams are not very good this year. They do have Michigan State up next. But Michigan State has been struggling a bit record-wise, even though I think they're, as I keep saying, they're way better than their record indicates. But I think Illinois is going to be focused on Nebraska here, man, because Illinois is not coming off of any big games. Their game up next is only like semi-big, but it's not for 6 days. And they know what Nebraska's done to the other heavy hitters in the conference, so I don't think they're going to lapse in focus here. And Illinois is the way better team than Nebraska, man. I'm sorry. I think Ken Baum has this line being above 10 in this one. So the line's actually a little bit short, giving maybe a little bit too much credit to Nebraska, even though I think Nebraska is good. And I think they've sealed a tournament bid at this point. I think they're definitely going to be in the tournament at this point. But what does Nebraska have left to prove at this point, man? Like, their goal this year is obviously making the tournament, because I don't even think they really expected. I think they expected to maybe be fighting to maybe potentially be in like the tournament bubble, but now they're like almost definitively in the tournament. I think like they've pretty much reached what they want to do, even though, yeah, they probably want to beat Illinois as well, but something's going to catch up to them. And Nebraska's like playing over their heads here a bit. I would say they've more than accomplished their season goals at this point already. So I think anything left is just gravy. So you might say that'll take the pressure off of them a little bit. But Illinois, I mean, they're just the much better team, man. And I think they will not be unfocused in this one just because they don't have this surrounded by any big games here. Illinois coming into this one. You got Illinois. Let me see here on Ken Baum website here. He has Illinois ranked 322nd in luck. So he has them way down in the luck index. He has Illinois as a very unlucky team, and he has them ranked 10th in the country, but as one of the least lucky teams in the country as well, along with he has a lot of the high-ranked teams being some of the unluckiest teams right now, whereas he has Nebraska 56th in luck. So, and ranked 51st in the country. So not bad, but he has Nebraska as being a very lucky team so far this year, meaning that they've won some games that they should have lost, like that Wisconsin game probably, whereas Illinois has lost more games that they probably should have won. So the luck index on both of these plays that I have today in college basketball, the luck index on Ken Palm is kind of telling you which team is definitely the significantly better team here, and that's SMU and Illinois in these two games. The market is actually flipped now to Illinois having 65% of the tickets and only 63% of the cash, so I don't like seeing that, but I think it's a letdown spot for Nebraska. I like the luck index aspect of this, and I think the line is actually slightly short here. So I like Illinois in this one. So that's what I'm doing. SMU -7.5 and Illinois -9.5. And we're playing the luck index factor here as well. Like I said, that, and I think Illinois does want to play at a faster pace than Nebraska does as well. So, and that might wind up being the case on Illinois' home floor. I think Illinois might push the tempo past the pace where it's really comfortable for Nebraska. Illinois, a very good offensive team, and they play faster than many teams in the country, faster than Nebraska likes to play. So even though Nebraska's not necessarily a slow team, but I think Illinois plays faster than their preferred pace. So Illinois might be able to take control of the pace in this one too, because they will be at home. So I like those two. Over in the NBA, I also have two plays. First one is going to be on the Detroit Pistons +7. This is down from 7.5 to 7. It looks like it might continue to go down, so I would grab the 7 before it goes away, because I saw 7s and 6.5s out there just a little while ago. This is a fade of the Orlando Magic, even though according to pregame, the Magic have 77% of the cash, but 51% of the tickets are on the Detroit Pistons. I don't buy that. I don't think the public percentage is going to be on the Pistons. How could it be, man? They're the Detroit Pistons. They had a historically bad run this year where they lost whatever it was, 24 games in a row or something like that. They're a 6-42 team. Yeah, the public is not going to be on the Detroit Pistons against an Orlando Magic team who has a winning record, as much as the Magic have been struggling recently. The Magic, they're on a long road trip right now. I mean, they're playing a 4th road game in a row, so that's not really a good spot for the Magic to be in, but they're coming off a win at Minnesota, man. They beat the T-Wolves, who are one of the top teams in the West. That's a huge win. They got to be in a letdown spot here, man, and that puts them at 2-1 on the road trip, and the only loss on the road trip was a very slight 2-point loss to start the road trip at Dallas. So they got up for that game too. They didn't really suffer the sandwich spot going into San Antonio, where I forget, was I on San Antonio in that one? I don't remember. I might have been, but San Antonio did not cover the spread in that one, lost by 10. So Orlando was able to keep it going, and then they were able to beat the T-Wolves as well. I think something's got to run out for Orlando here, playing a 4th straight road game, coming off a monster win, the best game that they played on the road trip by far, obviously beating the T-Wolves. And they're going to have the Miami Heat up next to close the road trip. So they kind of swing back down to Florida, and they play their Florida rival. That's still a big game, man, against the Miami Heat. Miami's well, they're actually tied in the division right now, but I guess Miami might have the tiebreaker because they're considered to be ahead of Orlando in the division. That's a big divisional game there, man. So this is a sandwich spot for Orlando, coming off a big win over one of the best teams in the West, the T-Wolves, and they have the big Southeast Division battle against Miami coming up next. I think they might look past the Detroit Pistons here, man. So I like the Pistons in this spot. It's not that often that I'm playing the Pistons this year, although they were my team to bet on last year, where they just kept covering for me, and they were my best NBA team last year. Hopefully, we get it in this one, because they haven't been that good for me this year. I haven't played them as much this year, but I think they're probably below 500 covering the spread when I play them this year. But let's get this one done, man. The Pistons, they're coming off a loss, back-to-back losses. They beat the Thunder before that, which is a shocking win for Detroit, really shocking. They were able to win that game and win it convincingly, which is crazy. But then after that, they haven't won since then. They lost at Cleveland in a fairly tough game. Then they lost to the Clippers in kind of a less tough game. The Clippers just obviously outmanned Detroit in that one. So now Detroit's just kind of staying at home. They got the Magic coming in. I think Detroit will be focused on this one. I mean, they're coming off a couple losses. I think they're going to want to put in an effort. One thing you got to say about Detroit, man, is as bad as they've been this year, they do continue putting in the effort. Even in that long loss streak, they did have some games where they were not that far off from winning those games. So they've played somewhat competitively in some of these games, so they're not giving up. So that's what I'll give to Detroit. So I'm taking it. It's a bad spot for the Magic, even though I don't like what what pregame is showing me in the cash discrepancy there. Detroit, yeah, it's a bad spot for the Magic. So I like Detroit +7 in that one. One thing I forgot to mention, by the way, going back to the college basketball for 1 second here, I forgot to mention a little bonus for you here. Bonus info. Nebraska, if you look at their play on the road this year, it is not good, dude. They're I believe 1-4, 1-5 on the road. What is it? Let me see. So on the road, they lost by double digits to Minnesota, losing by 11. They won by 16 at Kansas State, so 1-1. They lost by 16 at Wisconsin, lost by 18 at Iowa, lost by 5, which I believe was in overtime, at Rutgers, who I believe is actually the worst team that they played on the road. Maybe. I think probably that's the case. Maybe besides, I think Rutgers might be worse than Minnesota. So the only Nebraska game, besides the Kansas State win, the only other road game that they've even come within double digits in was the loss to Rutgers. And that was the worst team that they played. That was the only road loss that they had that was even close on the road. And that was against the worst team out of all of these. And then they lost by 22 in their last road game at Maryland, although they might have been looking ahead to the Wisconsin and Illinois games in that game. That was a tough spot going into Maryland, but Nebraska's not good on the road, dude. They're 1-5, and 4 out of 5 of those losses have been by double digits. So Nebraska does not have a good track record on the road this year. And I know I've said that in a couple other games, and it has not panned out for me, but it still is a factor, I think, when a team just doesn't play that well on the road, even though you do get used to playing on the road the more road games you play. But even so, don't like it for Nebraska, dude. I don't like the spot for Nebraska, so hopefully Illinois can get it done for us, even though it would mean a much less interesting game if Illinois is going to win that one by margin. But I do just think that is going to be the case. It's weird that I'm laying a couple of big favorites here in college basketball, but I'm more likely to do that in college basketball than the NBA, where you do have some games that are more mismatches in even as much parity as college basketball has. You do find more mismatches, of course, in college basketball with 300 something teams in college basketball than in the NBA, where teams are kind of on a bit more of a level playing field, even though you do have maybe about 20 points separating like the best team, the Celtics, from Detroit, I guess, who was the worst team. You'd probably, if you had a full Celtics roster, you'd probably see the Celtics favored by more than 20 at home against Detroit. But moving on, the final NBA play I'm on is the Utah Jazz. Oh, God. Utah had a nice run a little while ago, but they've crashed down to earth. But I like the spot for the Utah Jazz here, man. They're hosting the Milwaukee Bucks. Utah's up from 1-2, and it looks like it's going through the 2. It's 2 with juice right now. I was able to land a 1.5 on this. I think laying the 2 probably still fine. If you want to go money line on this one, I wouldn't blame you either. You can probably get a cheap money line price on the Utah Jazz as well. The public is only going to want to come in and play the Milwaukee Bucks here, man. I mean, everybody knows who the Bucks are. They have Giannis. They're the better team than the Jazz, of course, as the line is telling you, because the Jazz are not getting a full home court at home, really, especially if you take it at 1.5 like I did. But this line's moving fast, dude. Like I said, it's at 2, maybe even 2 with juice at this point. So I would try to get on this at the lowest possible number. Jazz have 66% of the cash on them, but 76% of the tickets over on the other side on the Bucks. So the cash discrepancy is in agreement with me. And unfortunately, yesterday, the 2 games I said the market was disagreeing with me on, I lost both of them on what was it, NC State, although I think NC State probably should have gotten there. That was real close, and they were covering in the final seconds of that game, although it was very close. And then the New York Knicks one, Knicks just had a terrible fourth quarter, man. So that game could have gotten there as well. So I don't know. But this one, the cash discrepancy is certainly on my side on the Utah Jazz. This is a bad spot for the Milwaukee Bucks, dude. The Bucks, they're playing a 4th straight road game as well, just like the other game that I mentioned. Excuse me. And they're on a back-to-back. So this is a tough spot for them, man. Although they did have 2 days off prior to the previous game last night, where they went into Dallas and they beat Dallas. That's a big win, dude. They went into Dallas, won the game. You go in, you beat Luka. I assume Luka played in that game. Big win over Dallas, man. Dallas is a decent team. I mean, they have a decent record. And that was a game where Dallas was way ahead early. Dallas was winning by 25 points early in the game, and Milwaukee came all the way back and won. A huge win. They had to put in a big effort in that one, and now they have to turn around, go into elevation. They have to go from Dallas up into Salt Lake City with no time off, play the Utah Jazz, and up next they have Phoenix and Minnesota. 2 bigger games, really, because those teams have better records. So this does not look good, man. I think this is a spot where Milwaukee, they're in a sandwich spot for the most part. I think they might overlook the Jazz here, or they might just not have enough left in the tank after having to do what they did last night to come back and beat Dallas, having no time off like this, even though they were decently rested going into the Dallas game. Even so, this is bad, dude. And they got, like I said, Phoenix and Minnesota coming up next. Phoenix in 2 days on Tuesday. I think they might they're definitely not in a good spot here, the Bucks. And the Bucks, they were in a bad spot in the game before Dallas. I don't know if I played that one or not. Did I play that one? Because that was definitely a sandwich spot going into Portland. They were coming off a 6-point loss in Denver in elevation, and then coming out of elevation, having to play at Portland with Dallas on deck, and they lost to Portland. I forget if I was on that game or not. I don't know if I was. I think I might have been. Looks like the line was a 10.5-point line on that one. I don't remember if I was on that one or not, but that was a bad spot for Milwaukee there where they lost to Portland. But they had 2 days off after that to crack that losing momentum, and then they were able to have that big win last night in Dallas. And like I said, with Phoenix, who's going to be a playoff team most likely, with Kevin Durant there, and then Minnesota, obviously one of the top teams in the West, coming up next. That's when they return home. They have to face Minnesota. I think this is that sandwich spot where they might not be in the best situation here to put in a full focused effort here against the Utah Jazz. I like the Utah Jazz in the spot a lot more. The Jazz, I believe, did not play yesterday, so they have the rest advantage as well. And I don't know if the line is really factoring that in enough. The Jazz actually have 2 days off. So, of course, the Bucks are the better team. So, I don't know. Maybe debatably this line shouldn't even be favoring the Jazz. I don't know. Because I think this line is factoring in the rest a little bit. But it looks like it's still been moving up. And the cash discrepancy, some of the professionals still have been coming in on the Jazz, at least at those lower numbers. The Jazz, much better rest spot. They have 2 days off, and they're in the much more positive spot, even though they did have a difficult game in their previous game against the Philadelphia 76ers, and they did come within 3 against them. They did play pretty well against the 76ers. They came back in that game, didn't go away. Maxey scored 51 points against him in that game. Of course, Embiid was out in that game because he's been injured, and he's going to be out for a while. So that was an Embiid-less 76ers, but it is still the 76ers, so it is still a big game for the Jazz. But when you have the Milwaukee Bucks coming into your house, that's also a big game, man. Even though Utah does have Oklahoma City up next as well, and they played Oklahoma City pretty well not too long ago. The last time they played them competitively. That was the game that broke their win streak that they had there, where they'd won 6 games in a row or something. So will they be looking ahead to Oklahoma City? I don't know, maybe, because that is a big game and a little bit of quick revenge for Utah. Losing by 5 in their own house. But even so, you're not going to overlook Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks, man. I don't think you're going to overlook this Bucks team. I like the Jazz here. They have 2 extra days off to help break this 3-game loss streak that they've been on, which started when they were out on the road. They were on a long road trip, and at the end of that road trip, they got blown out by Brooklyn, and then they lost by double digits the next night at the New York Knicks. That's some tough spots to be in, man. That was back-to-back, and those it wound up being a 3rd game in 4 days and a 4th game in 6 days to finish that road trip. Really tough spots there. And then they had to return back home to Utah from New York City with only 1 day off. So that's not a good spot for them either, even though they put in a decent effort against Philadelphia. That first game back home, man, I always say it's a really distracted spot. Even though they put in a decent performance, they lost the game. And now they're in that 2nd game back home, and they've had 2 days off to get their home affairs in order and break that losing momentum that they've had there with 3 straight losses. So I think they're going to be this is a good spot for them to be focused here, man. With the extra days off to put that losing momentum aside and to get all your home affairs in order. That 2nd home game back home after you drop the 1st game back home, even if it was a good effort, they still lost the game. That 2nd game back home tends to be a much better spot for you to have put your home affairs in order and have them aside and actually focus on basketball. So I think that's going to be the case here. Utah's in a positive focus spot here, whereas the Bucks are certainly not. The Bucks, I think, are in a sandwich spot where they might overlook the Jazz. So long-ass video for 4 plays, man. But let's start turning this around. Let's get back on the winning track here. I got to do a Super Bowl video, man, because The Super Bowl, usually you can wait. Like, I'm probably going to have a few plays on the Super Bowl. There are props that I kind of like blindly play in every Super Bowl for the most part. And I actually already have played the side in the Super Bowl. And I did mention it already, like right after the NFC Championship and AFC Championship ended, that I was probably going to wind up on the 49ers, and I am. And I'll describe it in more detail when I do a Super Bowl video. But the line has been moving, dude. It's gone up to like 2.5, but I still see it at 1.5 in a bunch of spots. I actually laid 1 once it got to its lowest point on the 49ers a few days back. I was able to jump on the 49ers at that price, but 1.5, there's no difference. So if you want to lay the 49ers 1.5, it is going to be a play of mine at 49ers -1. So I would say go ahead and do that. And worst case, you'll be able to play a decent price on the 49ers money line. So I'll talk about it more in a Super Bowl video, but you'll probably be able to get -130, even on the day of. Like Super Bowl, I usually wait because so much public comes in there. There's so much of the public. There's such a public influx of bets that usually you can get like good value on pretty much all the numbers that you want to play on game time, because usually you're kind of going against what the public perception is. And that is the case with the side and that one playing the 49ers. But anyway, I'll describe it when I have a video there for the Super Bowl. But yeah, if you want to play the 49ers, if you can find a 1 or a 1.5 right now, I do see 1.5 still out there right now. Go ahead and do that if you want to. If you want to tail me on that one, 1.5, there's no real difference between those two, I wouldn't say. Of course, now that I say that, the 49ers will win by 1. No, hopefully not. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they win by a couple points and get it done. Anyway, my plays today, a long-ass video for these 4 plays today. College basketball, SMU -7.5, which I actually found a reduced juice, so lucky me. Illinois -9.5. NBA, Detroit Pistons +7, Utah Jazz -1.5. That's going to do it for me, man. Have a happy, holy Sunday. Even though we're gambling, we're not really gambling. We're wagering. We're using skill. So it's fine here. We're only playing where we think we have an edge. We're not leaving it up to any sort of I mean, even though there is luck involved, there is skill involved here. So we're not totally leaving it up to just chance and to the gods. So have a good one, man. Peace out.